The fluorescent lights of Northwood General's third floor hummed a monotonous, soul-crushing drone. It was a sound Clara Hayes had come to associate with invisibility. At 48, with streaks of premature silver woven through her tightly bound hair and a pronounced limp she tried to hide, she was a ghost in pale blue scrubs. She moved through the graveyard shift with a quiet efficiency that was consistently mistaken for timidity. Her hands, when not occupied, carried a fine tremor, a detail the hospital's golden boy, Dr. Sterling Vance, never failed to notice. Hayes, his voice slick with condescension, cut through the 3 a.m. quiet. Refill the saline drips in 304, and try not to spill anything this time. Those shaky hands of yours are a lawsuit waiting to happen. A few of the younger nurses, clustered around the central station, stifled giggles. Jessica, Vance's most ardent sycophant, didn't bother to hide her smirk. Doctor's right, Clara. Maybe you should stick to stocking linens. Less delicate work. Clara's gaze, a deep and weary gray, flickered up from the chart she was filing. She looked at them, not with anger, but with a flat, assessing calm that they misinterpreted as weakness. Her eyes tracked their postures, the way Jessica leaned on the counter, off balance, the way Vance puffed out his chest, a classic dominance display. It was all data. Useless data for the most part, but her mind collected it all the same. A habit forged in places where misreading a room meant a flag-draped coffin. "Yes, doctor," she whispered, her voice barely a rustle of dry leaves. She turned, her limp more pronounced when she was tired, and headed for the supply closet. The tremor in her hands was worse tonight. A cold front was moving in, and the barometric pressure always agitated the scarred tissue and titanium pins holding her left femur together. They saw weakness. She felt the memory of a Blackhawk going down in the Hindu Kush, the sickening lurch, the shriek of metal, the impact that had pulverized bone and ended a career. For 6 months, she had endured this. After 2 decades of service, after leading teams in the world's most dangerous corners, she had sought quiet. She'd wanted a place where the only emergency was a falling blood pressure, where the loudest sound was a code blue alarm, not an incoming RPG. She'd used a simplified version of her records, her community college nursing refresher course highlighted, her extensive classified medical training listed simply as field medic experience. They'd hired her for the night shift, a position no one else wanted. She was the old, quiet nurse, the broken one. Dr. Vance, a man whose greatest hardship was getting a B+ in organic chemistry at Yale, had decided she was his personal project in humiliation. He was a surgeon of considerable textbook skill, but his arrogance was a malignancy that infected the entire floor. He mocked her limp, her age, her silence. He'd once held up a trembling hand in the middle of morning rounds and asked, "Hayes, did you forget your Parkinson's meds today?" The laughter had echoed down the hall. Clara simply absorbed it. She retreated further into herself. She did her job. She cleaned bedpans, changed IVs, and monitored vitals with a precision that went unnoticed. While the younger staff scrolled through their phones, she would observe the patterns on the cardiac monitors, her mind automatically running differential diagnoses. She would notice the subtle shift in a patient's breathing, the faint cyanosis around their lips, and would quietly adjust their oxygen before an alarm could even trigger. She saved lives in whispers, her interventions so subtle they were often credited to someone else or to simple luck. It was better that way. Anonymity was armor. Tonight, the cruelty was escalating. Vance, buoyed by being named the hospital's Physician of the Year, was on a tear. He'd found a microscopic smudge on a sterile tray she'd prepared. He held it up to the light like a prosecutor presenting evidence. "This is what I'm talking about, people," he announced to the half-dozen staff members at the nurses' station. "This is the standard of care we get from Nurse Hayes, a complete lack of attention to detail. In my world, a smudge like this means infection. It means sepsis. It means death. Do you understand that, Hayes? You are not just incompetent, you are a danger." Clara stood motionless, her face a placid mask. Inside, the old training kicked in. Control your breathing. Lower your heart rate. Do not engage. The objective is to maintain cover. "I'll re-sterilize the entire kit, doctor," she said, her voice even. "You're damn right you will," he sneered, dropping the tray with a clatter. "And then you'll clean the floors, all of them. The janitor called in sick. And you seem better suited for that line of work anyway." He turned to the others. "Let this be a lesson. We are a premier institution. We do not tolerate mediocrity." As Clara retrieved a mop and bucket, a junior resident named Leo quietly approached her. He was a kind boy with perpetually worried eyes. "He shouldn't talk to you like that, Clara. It's not right." She gave him a small, tired smile. "It's okay, Leo. He's just meticulous." "He's a bully," Leo whispered, pressing a warm protein bar into her hand. "You're the best nurse on this floor. I see what you do. The way you caught that potassium imbalance in Mrs. Gable. You saved her life." "Just doing my job," Clara murmured, pocketing the bar. The small kindness was a pinprick of light in the suffocating darkness of her current existence. She started mopping, the rhythmic, repetitive motion a form of meditation. Each swipe of the mop was a drill, a field stripping of a rifle, a packing of a wound. She could do this. She could endure. This was its own kind of war, a battle of attrition against her own spirit. The first sign that the world was about to shatter came not as a sound, but as a vibration. A low, deep thrum that resonated through the concrete floor, felt more in the bones than heard with the ears. Then came the sirens. Not one or two, but a rising, screaming chorus of them, converging on the hospital from all directions. The double doors to the emergency department burst open downstairs, the chaos bleeding up the stairwells and elevator shafts. A panicked voice crackled over the hospital PA system. "Code triage. I repeat, code triage. Mass casualty incident. All available medical personnel to the ED now." Vance, who had been preening by the coffee machine, straightened his designer scrubs. This was his moment. "All right, people, let's go. Move. Hayes, you stay here. Keep mopping. The last thing I need is you tripping over your own feet and causing another injury." He and his team ran for the elevators, leaving Clara alone on the gleaming, sterile floor. For a moment, she stood perfectly still, the mop handle clutched in her hand. The tremors were gone. A profound, almost terrifying stillness had settled over her. The distant sirens, the shouting, the thrumming in the floor. It wasn't chaos to her. It was a symphony she knew by heart. It was the sound of things coming apart. "Maintain cover," a voice in her head commanded. But another, older voice, a voice that sounded like her former CO, growled back. "Mission dictates posture." She dropped the mop. It clattered loudly in the sudden silence of the abandoned floor. She walked, her limp barely noticeable now, to the main desk. With swift, economical movements, she pulled up the local emergency broadcast on a monitor. A jackknifed fuel tanker on the I-95 overpass, a multi-car pileup, dozens of injuries. And then, a single line that made the blood freeze in her veins. The collision involved a military convoy, reportedly transporting a high-level government official. She didn't need to hear more. Her hands moved with a life of their own, her fingers flying across the keyboard, accessing hospital supply manifests. She wasn't thinking about what Vance had said. She was running protocols, assessing resources, planning for contingencies. Her mind was a cold, clear engine of tactical medicine. Tourniquets, chest seals, IV starter kits, O-negative blood, surgical airways. Down in the emergency department, it was bedlam. Gurneys lined the hallways, the injured overflowing from every bay. The air was thick with the smell of blood and fear. Dr. Vance was in the center of it all, but he wasn't the calm, commanding surgeon from the OR. He was overwhelmed, his face pale, shouting contradictory orders. "Get me a chest tube. No, start a central line. Where's the portable X-ray? Jessica, why isn't this man intubated?" "We're out of verse, doctor," Jessica cried back, her face streaked with tears and something that wasn't hers. "The anesthesiologist is with another critical patient." They were losing people. Simple, preventable deaths. A sucking chest wound left unsealed. An arterial bleed that a single tourniquet could have stopped. Vance was a master of controlled, sterile environments. In the bloody, asymmetric warfare of a mass casualty event, his Ivy League education was worthless. It was into this chaos that the most critical patient arrived. A team of paramedics, their faces grim, wheeled in a gurney carrying a man in a torn, blood-soaked army dress uniform. A star was visible on his shoulder. A general. He was unconscious, his breathing shallow and rapid, his skin a ghastly, waxy gray. A large, ugly piece of shrapnel protruded from his abdomen. "General Marcus Thorne!" one of the paramedics yelled. "Massive internal bleeding, GCS of 5, BP is 60 over palp. We're losing him." Vance shoved his way to the gurney. "Get him to trauma 1. Page ortho, page vascular. Get me 20 units of ONEG on a rapid infuser." He placed his hands on the general's chest to start compressions, a move that made the paramedic's eyes go wide. "Doctor, no. His chest is unstable. We think he has a flail segment and a tension pneumo." "I'm the doctor here," Vance roared. "I'll make the calls." It was at that moment Clara arrived. She hadn't run. She had moved with a deliberate ground-eating stride that was unnervingly fast. She carried a small, self-packed trauma kit she kept in her locker, a holdover from a life she was supposed to have left behind. She took in the scene in a single sweeping glance. The overflowing bays, the panicked staff, the dying general on the gurney, and the incompetent doctor about to kill him. Her eyes locked on the general's chest. One side was barely rising with his gasping breaths. His neck veins were distended, classic signs. The paramedic was right. Compressions would just pump more air into his chest cavity, collapsing his lung and crushing his heart. "Stop," Clara said. Her voice was not the whisper they were used to. It was a command. It was low, resonant, and cracked like a whip in the chaotic room, cutting through the noise. Every head turned. Vance looked up, his face a mask of fury. "Hayes, I told you to stay upstairs. I'm firing you. Get the hell out of my ER before I have security throw you out." Clara ignored him. Her focus was absolute. She moved to the gurney, her limp gone, replaced by a balanced, predatory grace. I said, "Stop compressions." She placed a hand on Vance's, her grip surprisingly strong. Her tremors were gone. Her hands were as steady as granite. "You're killing him." "You're fired, you insolent old woman," he shrieked, trying to shake her off, but her grip was like iron. "He has a tension pneumothorax," Clara stated, her voice cold and clinical. She looked at the terrified junior resident, Leo. "Get me a 14-gauge angiocath and a betadine swab, now." Leo, seeing the absolute certainty in her eyes, scrambled to obey. Vance was sputtering, his face turning purple with rage. "Security! Get this woman out of here!" But no one was listening. Clara had become the center of gravity in the room. She ripped open the general's uniform shirt. "Second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line," she narrated, her voice a calm, instructional tone. Leo slapped the catheter into her hand. She didn't hesitate. With a practiced, precise motion, she located the spot and plunged the large bore needle deep into the general's chest. There was a sudden audible hiss of escaping air. The general's chest rose evenly with his next breath. On the monitor, his blood pressure, which had been plummeting, stabilized and began to creep back up. The entire room fell silent. Everyone stared at Clara, this quiet, shaky old nurse who had just performed a life-saving procedure with the confidence of a master surgeon. Vance looked from the monitor to Clara, his mouth hanging open. How did you—" Clara didn't answer. She was already moving on. "He's still hypotensive. The shrapnel's in his abdomen, likely nicked the aorta or the vena cava. We need to get him to an OR, but we need to get blood into him first. His veins are collapsed." She looked at Jessica, who was frozen in place. "Get me an IO drill." "A what?" Jessica asked, her voice trembling. "Intraosseous drill," Clara snapped, her patience gone. "We're putting a line directly into his bone marrow. Move." She turned to Leo. "I need O-negative blood, tranexamic acid, and a level 1 infuser. And get me a portable ultrasound. I'm going to do a fast exam right here." The authority in her voice was absolute. It wasn't the authority of a diploma on the wall. It was the authority of someone who had done this 100 times before in the back of helicopters in dusty alleys with bullets flying. The staff, who had been floundering under Vance's panicked leadership, now moved with purpose, galvanized by her calm command. Vance finally found his voice. "You can't do that. You're just a nurse. That's assault." Clara finally turned her full attention to him. Her gray eyes were like chips of ice. "I am the only person in this room who knows how to keep him alive for the next 5 minutes. So you have 2 choices, doctor. You can help, or you can get the hell out of my way. But if you interfere again, I will physically remove you." Before Vance could respond, a new sound began to dominate the cacophony. A deep, percussive thump, thump, thump that grew rapidly louder, shaking the very windows of the hospital. It was the sound of heavy helicopters, not the single light medical chopper the hospital used. This was the sound of military power. The double doors of the ambulance bay were wrenched open. The wind howled through, sending papers flying. The sound was deafening now. 2 MH-60 Blackhawks were hovering just outside, their rotor wash tearing at the trees in the parking lot. Ropes dropped from the helicopters, and figures began to fast rope down, landing with practiced ease on the tarmac. A team of 6 men, clad in matte black combat gear, moved with terrifying speed and precision into the ER. They wore no identifying insignia, but their weapons, their movements, their sheer presence screamed special operations. They fanned out, securing the area, their M4 rifles held in a low ready. The hospital security guards took one look and wisely stepped aside. Their leader, a mountain of a man with a thick beard and eyes that had seen too much, scanned the chaotic room. He wasn't looking at the doctors or the nurses. He was looking for someone specific. His voice, amplified by the swirling wind and the roar of the rotors, boomed through the ER. "Where is she?" he yelled. "We got a priority 1 case. Where is the SEAL nurse?" Every eye in the room swiveled from the commandos to Clara. Dr. Vance's face went from purple rage to a pasty, sickly white. "SEAL nurse?" he stammered, the words catching in his throat. The team leader's eyes finally landed on Clara. He saw her standing over the general, an IO drill in one hand, her face illuminated by the blinking lights of the monitor. A slow wave of recognition, then profound relief, washed over his hardened features. "Valkyrie," he breathed, his voice suddenly filled with reverence. He strode forward, his heavy combat boots silent on the linoleum. The rest of his team followed, forming a protective semicircle around the gurney, their weapons pointed outward, creating a sterile pocket in the chaos. "Axe?" Clara said, her voice tight with focus as she expertly drilled the IO line into the general's tibia. "Good of you to drop in. His pressure is stabilizing, but he needs a surgeon, a real one." She shot a pointed glare at Vance, who seemed to shrink inside his expensive scrubs. The team leader, Master Chief Axe Peterson, nodded. "We've got a mobile surgical team on the bird. They're ready for him. General Thorne he's important, ma'am." "They're all important, Master Chief," Clara replied without looking up, securing the line and hooking it to the rapid infuser. The machine whirred to life, pumping warmed blood directly into the general's bone marrow. His vitals immediately began to improve. General Thorne's eyelids fluttered. He groaned, his eyes struggling to focus. They landed on Clara's face, hovering just inches from his. Recognition flickered in his pain-filled gaze. "Hayes," he rasped, his voice a bare whisper. "Commander, Hayes, they said you were dead." "Commander." The word hung in the air, thick and heavy. Dr. Vance looked like he was going to be physically sick. Jessica's jaw was on the floor. Leo just stared, his mind struggling to reconcile the quiet, timid woman he knew with the scene unfolding before him. Axe looked at Vance, his eyes burning with a cold fire. You're the doctor in charge here." Vance could only manage a weak, pathetic nod. "You fired her?" Axe's voice was dangerously low. I didn't know," Vance stammered. "You didn't know?" Axe took a step closer, his sheer size and menace forcing Vance back. "You didn't know that you had a living legend working in your hospital. You didn't know that Commander Clara Hayes is one of the most decorated special operations combat medics in the history of the Navy. That she's credited with over 200 confirmed lives saved in combat, often while under direct fire. That she was awarded the Navy Cross for pulling 3 of my men out of a burning vehicle in Ramadi, treating them for 26 hours straight while holding off enemy fighters with her sidearm. That the tremor in her hands isn't from weakness, it's from nerve damage she sustained dragging a wounded SEAL 2 Klicks to an evac point after her own leg was shattered by an IED. Axe's voice grew louder with every word, a litany of heroism that echoed through the stunned silence of the emergency room. The limp she has? That's from the titanium rod holding her leg together from that same incident, an injury that earned her a Purple Heart. She was medically retired, but she refused to stop saving lives, so she came here, to this place, looking for some peace. And you had her mopping floors? The contempt in Axe's voice was a physical thing. He gestured to the general on the gurney. This man, General Marcus Thorne, is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He's alive right now because of her. The procedure she just performed on him, that needle decompression, that I.O. line, she invented the field protocol for that. She taught it to generations of SEALs, Rangers, and Green Berets. She has forgotten more about trauma medicine than you will ever learn from your fancy textbooks, Doctor. Vance was hyperventilating, his eyes darting around for an escape, but he was surrounded by a wall of silent, heavily armed operators. The hospital administrator, a portly man named Mr. Davison, had arrived, drawn by the commotion. His face was a picture of horror as he listened to Axe's speech. I demand you leave my hospital," Davison blustered, trying to assert some authority. "You have no jurisdiction here." Axe slowly turned to face him. He reached into a pouch on his vest and pulled out a satellite phone, hitting a single button. He held it out. "This is a direct line to the Secretary of Defense. He has authorized my team to take any and all necessary actions to ensure the safety of General Thorne and the recovery of Commander Hayes. That authorization includes assuming full command of this facility if we deem it necessary. Would you like to be the one to tell him that you're interfering with a national security operation?" Davison's face went pale. He shook his head, speechless. Clara had finished stabilizing the general. She straightened up, her back cracking with a soft pop. She looked tired, but the weariness was different now. It wasn't the fatigue of a defeated spirit. It was the exhaustion of a warrior after a battle won. "He's stable for transport," she said to Axe. "Get him on the bird. I want him in the air 5 minutes ago." "Roger that, ma'am," Axe said, the title of respect snapping through the air. His men moved with practiced efficiency, their movements a blur as they disconnected the gurney from the hospital monitors and carefully wheeled it towards the door. As they passed, General Thorne reached out a weak hand and clasped Clara's arm. "Thank you, Commander," he whispered. "The country owes you again." Clara simply nodded, a flicker of the old sadness in her eyes. "Just doing my job, sir. Get well." The team moved out, the roar of the helicopters swelling and then slowly receding as they lifted off into the night sky. The ER was left in a state of stunned, surreal silence. The remaining patients and staff just stared at Clara. She stood there for a moment, the blood of a 4-star general on her hands, her blue scrubs torn. She looked at the faces around her, the fear, the awe, the shame. She looked at Vance, who was now being flanked by 2 stone-faced military police officers who had entered with the SEAL team. "Doctor." "Vance," one of the MPs said, his voice devoid of emotion, "you're being detained for questioning on grounds of criminal negligence and impeding a federal officer in the performance of her duties. Please come with us." Vance didn't resist. He was a broken man, his career and reputation shattered in the space of 10 minutes. As they led him away, he looked back at Clara, his eyes pleading. "I'm sorry," he mouthed. Clara just gave him a long, level look. She didn't offer forgiveness. She didn't offer anything. She simply watched him go. The hospital administrator, Mr. Davison, scurried over to her, wringing his hands. "Commander Hayes, Clara, I am so sorry. This is a terrible misunderstanding. Your job, of course it's safe. We'll give you a promotion, head of trauma, anything you want." Clara slowly shook her head. She began to peel off her bloody gloves with meticulous care. "I don't think this is the right fit for me, Mr. Davison." But where will you go?" he asked, panicked at the thought of losing the hero he'd just discovered. Axe, who had remained behind, stepped to her side. "She's coming with us. The Secretary has already reactivated her commission on a provisional basis. There's a new program, training the next generation of combat medics. They need a director, someone who knows the cost." He held out a folded flag, the corner of a uniform jacket. It was her old one. Her commander's insignia gleamed under the harsh fluorescent lights. Clara looked at the uniform, then around the hospital floor, at the life she had tried to build, the quiet, the invisibility. It had been a lie. You can't hide from who you are. The war's always there, inside you. Maybe the only way to find peace wasn't to run from it, but to turn and face it, to use the skills it had given her to prepare others. She took a deep breath, the first truly full breath she'd taken in months. The tremors in her hands were back, but she no longer cared. They weren't a sign of weakness, they were a map of her life. They were a testament to the price of survival. She looked at Axe and gave a small, firm nod. Okay, let's go home. As they walked towards the exit, every staff member in the emergency room, doctors, nurses, residents, orderlies, stood aside. They formed a silent, spontaneous honor guard. Leo, his eyes filled with tears of awe and respect, stood straighter than he ever had in his life. Jessica looked at the floor, too ashamed to meet Clara's gaze. When Clara Hayes walked out of the doors of Northwood General, she didn't limp. She left behind the ghost of a broken nurse and stepped back into the world as the legend she had always been. The quiet was over. There were new lives to save. There were new warriors to train. And for the first time in a long time, she felt the tremor in her hands not as a curse, but as a promise. The promise of a storm that had finally broken.